On a highway in Northern Virginia, a brazen daytime shooting of employees from the Central Intelligence Agency stunned the country. The FBI were called in, but the nationwide search quickly became a far-reaching international manhunt. Agents hoped that after years of investigation, a daring operation halfway around the world would put an end to the global pursuit.
In Langley, Virginia, a terrorist fired into rush hour traffic. The victim seemed randomly selected, but the motive appeared to be political, targeting employees of the Central Intelligence Agency. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI quickly became involved in the investigation, processing more than 2,000 leads and crossing an ocean in the effort to deliver justice.
Langley, Virginia, a suburb of Washington, D.C., is home to the headquarters of the Central Intelligence Agency. Monday, January 25th, 1993. Another work week had started for thousands of CIA employees who routinely commute to their jobs at America's Global Intelligence Agency. Workers of varying security clearance and experience waited at the long light to turn left into the CIA compound. All were alone in their cars, except a young couple who had met at the CIA and had recently been married. As newlyweds, they seemed to have their entire life ahead of them. Then the young man was struck from behind by a gunman's bullet. Two employees behind the shooter fled from their vehicles as the man walked forward. A third employee sped off before he could fire. Two more ran the red light as their cars were peppered by bullets. The gunman then shot into a sixth car, hitting the 61-year-old man twice at point-blank range. Behind that car, the shooter realized the first man he shot was still alive. He aimed at the wounded man, this time killing him, but sparing his wife. Only one other employee remained, frozen by fear. The 66-year-old was killed instantly by two quick shots. After the young woman heard the killer speed off, she ran for safety. Dozens of urgent 911 calls flooded the switchboard in Fairfax County, Virginia. All available units were ordered to respond. Emergency personnel from several towns raced to save those that clung to life. Fairfax County Detective Fred Fife is assigned as lead detective.
One of the first steps was to make sure that the scene itself was safe. We weren't sure what type of individuals we may have been dealing with, so we had to set up an armed security around the scene to prevent, a further attack.
Choppers searched for the fugitive from overhead. Several motorists reported seeing him flee into the surrounding woods after he drove off. The CIA immediately dispatched its tactical security forces to comb the 250-acre compound in and around headquarters. An exhaustive search turned up nothing. Authorities secured a 3-mile radius and closed busy Route 123 except to emergency personnel. At the crime scene, police found 2 dead and 3 critically wounded. 4 others escaped unharmed, 3 of them women. FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett arrived moments after the shooting.
The first thing you do when you walk into a crime scene is, what's the obvious? Well, the obvious is this appears to be directed towards the CIA. It might be directed towards the individuals that were shot. But it was clearly somebody wanted to make a public statement during a rush hour traffic.
The victims were rushed to area hospitals as investigators began to interview the survivors. Their first step was to alert the public and area law enforcement to the description of the fugitive and his vehicle. But most witnesses saw little, and their accounts varied.
The witnesses stated that the suspect was a male, mostly olive-complected type of individual, armed with a rifle. And that was pretty much the composite description we were able to put together. Height varied. The vehicle ranged from being a brown station wagon to a blue truck. I think a lot of the people were in a panic situation and were shielding themselves from being victims.
One woman got a closer look than most. She described the shooter as a man with dark hair in his early 30s, wearing a tan jacket and dark pants. Though he had her in his sights, for some reason, he chose not to shoot.
We looked at the individuals that were killed, and we said, could there be a connection? Had they done something in the past that someone could have wanted to take revenge on them for whatever reason, whether it be personal or professional, because you got to look at this both ways.
The immediate crime scene covered an area of 50 square yards. Glass and shell casings littered the roadway. Forensic technicians needed to record every detail before the bodies of the two slain victims could be removed from their cars, according to Fairfax County crime scene detective Jeff Miller.
I have a duty to them, and my duty is I have to be their voice. They've been murdered. Here's this person who's silent forever, and somebody has to speak up for them. And so that's the way I look at it, is I'm their voice. And it's my job to find whatever it is that's going to help us find or identify the person who's responsible for this.
Crime scene investigators recovered 10 empty shell casings. They believe they were likely fired from an AK-47. Towards the back of the cars, where the gunman began firing, technicians also recovered one live round.
The forensic evidence always tells the truth. It's never clouded by someone's perception. It never lies to you. It's always telling the truth. And it's my job to find it. All I have to do is find it. And once I find it, and I'm able to examine it, it's going to tell me exactly what happened.
The live round on the ground told investigators that the weapon was a semi-automatic and had most likely jammed before the killer fired his first round. Noting the location of the casings in relation to the shattered glass enabled the team to determine the trajectories and order of the gunman's bullets. Investigators also gathered glass samples from each of the vehicle's broken windows. They hoped the combination of several types of glass found in the same location would prove significant.
You had a number of different cars. Each of the cars was a different manufacturer. It had a German car, had an American car, had a Swedish car. The glass that's put in these cars is all different. If some of this glass had spattered back on the shooter, even though it was microscopic, someone who had these three different kinds of glass on their clothing, that might be probative of the investigation.
While investigators continued to gather evidence at the crime scene, agents and detectives visited nearby hospitals to speak to the remaining survivors. The young woman who had lost her husband in the assault hadn't seen much since she hid below the dashboard most of the time. She said that the man could have shot her at any moment, but like the previous female survivor, he turned away instead of firing. She also told investigators that she and her husband normally used a different entrance to drive into the CIA compound. FBI agent Brad Garrett wondered who else might have known this.
We immediately started looking at who within the CIA, in other words, disgruntled employees, present employees, that may have had a relationship with these people that could have retaliated for whatever reason. There's a lot of bizarre people that have applied to work for the CIA, and they've rejected a lot of people.
At the Fairfax County Command Center, the female witness who had gotten the best look at the gunman worked with a police sketch artist.
Swear.
Based on her description, investigators believe the suspect was of Hispanic or Middle Eastern background. She had not gotten as good a look at his vehicle, but recalled that it was a station wagon. Investigators released the drawings to the public, hoping to elicit leads.
One of the first things we had to do was to get out through the media that afternoon a phone number or a system where the potential witnesses that had been in that area that morning could contact us. And we needed to isolate a phone number for that purpose and get it out to the media as quickly as possible.
As calls poured in, agents and detectives were still grappling to find a clear motive for the shooting. If they could deduce a reason for the shooter's actions, it would limit the potential suspect pool. Agents searched the victims' backgrounds for possibilities as to why they may have been targeted.
He then walked up to this car and fired one more shot into car H.
Once we started looking at the backgrounds of the individuals that were shot, and we looked at the circumstances as to why they were at that intersection, it didn't appear, at least to me, that there probably was a link between them being shot, those particular individuals being shot, and the person or persons that shot them.
Just 8 hours after the shooting, Fairfax County Detective Jeff Miller examined the cartridges recovered from the pavement at the crime scene. He confirmed the shells were from an AK-47 assault rifle, a weapon used primarily by Russian and Chinese armies. Upon closer inspection, Detective Miller discovered a latent fingerprint on the shell.
The difficult part about this whole situation was cartridge casing is a cylindrical shape. The fingerprint went about 300 degrees almost all the way around this cartridge case. So what I had to do was photograph it in different steps. I'd photograph it, then I would turn it about 1/16 of an inch, adjust the light so that it was exactly the same, and photograph it again. And then I would continue to do that over and over so that I had photographed the entire circumference of the cartridge casing.
The hour-long process yielded one complete fingerprint. It was investigators' first solid lead. Detectives fed the print into a system that was connected to 185 other databases throughout North America.
We could take that one latent fingerprint and send it to any automated fingerprint system in North America and ask them to search their database to see if that fingerprint was on file or was recorded within any of their automated systems.
Unfortunately, the extensive search provided no match.
Print it up?
Yeah.
Either the suspect had no record, or he had not committed any crimes within North America. The next morning, police looked for witnesses among area commuters on Route 123 who may have seen something unusual the morning of the attack. They handed out flyers with a sketch of the suspect to 3,000 motorists. Intense media attention generated sightings from across the country. None immediately panned out, but the reports were maintained in the command center's growing database. Through the night, patrols on the roads around Northern Virginia and the Washington, D.C. area remained on high alert. That evening, a car fitting the description of the suspects was pulled over by a Virginia state trooper. The trooper called for backup, then approached the vehicle.
Sir, stay
He had no idea if he had the shooter or if the man was carrying an AK-47. On January 26, 1993, 36 hours after a lone gunman opened fire with an AK-47 in front of CIA headquarters, killing 2 and wounding 3 others, Virginia state troopers stopped a vehicle that fit the description of the suspect's car.
Put your hands up. Keep your hands up.
The killer had been described vaguely as having an olive complexion, medium build, and dark hair.
Okay, buddy, we've been looking for you.
Though the man troopers stopped also fit that description, a fingerprint check confirmed he was not the fugitive.
Okay, then we have,
By now, dozens of personnel from the CIA, ATF, and the FBI had joined Fairfax County Detective Fred Fife's team in pursuit of the murderer.
As additional manpower was needed for different areas, they were brought in and supplemented us. The FBI was very generous. They supplied us not only with the hard technology, the computers and so forth, but their clerical staff to maintain the information management system that we had designed, that we felt we could process the leads as they were coming in.
FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett was concerned that despite recovering a fingerprint from a shell casing at the crime scene, investigators were still unable to identify the perpetrator or his motive. All they knew for sure was that the gunman used an AK-47.
So I made this decision. I said, let's go back and look at all the AK-47s purchased in the last year. And the reason we did that was that typically people who commit these kind of acts buy their weapons a short time or acquire their weapons a short time before they commit the act.
Over the next several days, ATF agents visited gun shops in the Virginia and Maryland area outside of Washington, D.C., since the purchase or possession of firearms is forbidden within city limits. They discovered that 1,000 AK-47s were purchased in Northern Virginia over the past year. Another 600 had been purchased in Maryland. Agents gathered records of every purchase and entered the gun owners' names into the command center's large computer database. At firing ranges within 100 miles of CIA headquarters, agents also questioned gun owners directly.
ATF. We're investigating the shootings near the CIA headquarters.
They asked if they remembered anyone in the past year who matched the suspect's description and had practiced with an AK-47.
Seen this guy?
They remembered no one.
Anybody that even fits this general.
By February 1st, a week after the shooting, investigators hoped their growing database of witness descriptions and gun purchases could provide a common link among the thousands of names and police reports entered so far. Agents and detectives set parameters for the database to cross-reference the suspect's physical characteristics with those who made a recent purchase of an AK-47 and who had a local address. The computer returned one name, 28-year-old Mir Amal Kanzi. He had purchased an AK-47 3 days before the shooting. He was a Pakistani immigrant who lived in Herndon, Virginia, and was reported missing 3 days after the shooting by his roommate. Investigators immediately dispatched a team of agents to track down Mir Amal Kanzi. Kanzi was not at home, but the roommate who reported him missing worked at nearby Dulles International Airport. Kanzi's roommate, also a Pakistani immigrant, was employed by a security company to operate a magnetometer that checked passengers for weapons.
Agent Johnson? Yeah. Any question him? Come with me? Yes, sir.
He told the FBI that he hadn't seen Kanzi for several days.
Set up an interview sometime soon. No, sir.
He said he was unable to talk at length since he was on duty, but would meet agents later at his apartment in Herndon, Virginia to answer all their questions.
If anything comes up, just give me a call.
Okay, sir.
The roommate added that he was scheduled to fly back to Pakistan later in the week, but would cooperate with authorities until then. When investigators arrived to question the roommate again, he wasn't there. They soon discovered that the roommate had changed his travel plans.
A lot of the plans and commitments that he had told the FBI agent and the detective on Sunday had started to change. He gave a notice at his apartment that he was going to be leaving on Tuesday instead of Thursday. He switched a flight to Pakistan back to Tuesday. That was the first opportunity he would have to fly out of the country. We started finding all this information. He shut his utilities off at his apartment. In other words, he was preparing to leave the United States in a big hurry.
With less than 24 hours until the roommate's flight departed, agents maintained constant surveillance, hoping to catch the roommate or Kanzi at home.
What's up?
Their perseverance paid off. They found the roommate alone at home.
So, what happened yesterday?
There were few items in the apartment.
Mind if I look in the bedroom? No, no problem.
It appeared that both Kanzi and the roommate were not planning to return. The man didn't know where Kanzi was now, but consented to allow the investigators to search what was left in the barren apartment. In a suitcase stored in the bedroom, agents discovered a Beretta and Makarov automatic pistols, ammunition for an AK-47, and a bulletproof vest.
About 10 years. About 10 years. I don't know anything about that.
The roommate denied any knowledge of the weapons and claimed that the suitcase belonged to Kanzi.
I didn't know anything about what he carries or what I don't watch.
Investigators continued to search the apartment. Under a couch wrapped in plastic, they found another gun.
I don't talk to him. I don't even have a conversation. He just pays the rent.
It was an AK-47, the same type of weapon used to kill 2 and wound 3 in front of CIA headquarters. The roommate said he didn't know the weapon was there and added that he had only met Kanzi a few months earlier when Kanzi had first moved in.
The roommate told us that Mr. Kanzi initially came to him through another Pakistani because Mr. Kanzi was looking for a place to live. The roommate said, fine, you can live with me, and they set an amount of money for Mr. Kanzi to live with him.
It's not mine.
They hoped the FBI lab could confirm forensically that they had found the murder weapon.
Never seen that before in my life.
But for now, their prime suspect, Mir Amal Kanzi, was still unaccounted for. By February 8, 1993, 2 weeks had passed since a lone gunman opened fire with an AK-47 in front of CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, killing 2 CIA employees and wounding 3 others. The FBI, ATF, and Fairfax County Police believed 28-year-old Mir Amal Kanzi, a Pakistani immigrant, was their prime suspect. At Kanzi's apartment in Herndon, Virginia, investigators continued their search where they had found an AK-47, the same type of weapon used in the CIA shootings. Kanzi was missing, and his Pakistani roommate, who was scheduled to return to Pakistan the following day, had no idea where Kanzi was now, according to FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett.
The roommate told us that he really didn't spend much time with Mr. Kanzi. The roommate worked 2 jobs, Mr. Kanzi worked a job. They would occasionally go to the mosque together to pray, but that their interactions with each other were very limited. They were in the apartment many times at different times of the day when the other one was gone.
Hoping to assail investigators' suspicions of him, the roommate signed his consent to assist with the investigation. In a closet, investigators found a tan field jacket similar to the one witnesses had described worn by the shooter.
In fact, I've seen him.
The roommate told him the coat belonged to Kanzi. Outside the apartment, the roommate pointed out Kanzi's vehicle parked at the curb, a small pickup truck. Officers confirmed it was registered to the suspect. Inside, they spotted a map that was open to the CIA headquarters area in Langley, Virginia.
Okay, look at that.
Close by, they also saw a clipping about the CIA director. Agents would need to secure a warrant before they could conduct a more thorough search. If this was the vehicle used by the killer, witnesses' descriptions of the car at the shooting had been wrong. Though the roommate had cooperated with investigators, Fairfax County Detective Fred Fife wasn't going to take any chances.
We knew Mr. Kanzi's roommate was planning on leaving the United States because he had purchased airline tickets for a flight out of the United States, which was one way. He was not planning on returning. He was deemed a material witness to the investigation and subsequently taken into custody and held based on his abilities to flee the United States.
At police headquarters, investigators continued to question Kanzi's roommate.
He might do something violent. It was the night that
He told them Kanzi had worked as a messenger for a local courier service since August of 1992. 6 months earlier, in February 1992, Kanzi had received political asylum and a work permit from the Immigration and Naturalization Service.
We were fortunate in this case that we had Mr. Kanzi's prints because he had no criminal record in the United States, but the Immigration Service here in the U.S. had fingerprinted him at one point because he had asked for asylum here in the United States. So they had a fingerprint card that we were able to get from them.
Lab technicians were called in to process the forensic evidence through the night as the roommate told investigators more about Kanzi.
Directed against the American.
He said Kanzi was usually quiet. But when he watched television news reports, he became enraged at how Muslims were being treated during conflicts in Bosnia, Iraq, and Israel. That's when Kanzi vowed to take action.
The roommate eventually admitted that Mr. Kanzi had told him that he was going to go do something big. And we asked him to define big, and he said, well, I'm not sure, but maybe a shooting of some sort. And he mentioned going and doing something big at the CIA, the White House, or the Israeli embassy.
Agents believe the roommate was not connected with the shootings. But he was not permitted to leave the country until the investigation was complete. Lab examiners compared the fingerprint lifted from the shell casing found at the shooting to Kanzi's fingerprint on file at the INS. They matched. Investigators also confirmed that the serial number of the weapon recovered in the apartment matched the serial number of the Chinese-made AK-47 purchased by Kanzi 3 days before the CIA killings. Kanzi had presented 2 forms of ID for a Virginia State Police background check, and the purchase had been approved within minutes. FBI lab examiners then compared bullets and shell casings test-fired through Kanzi's AK-47 with the bullets and shell casings collected from the crime scene by Fairfax detective Jeff Miller.
The firearms examiner was able to say that the bullets at the crime scene were fired from the gun that was collected from Kanzi's apartment. He was also able to examine the cartridge casings that he test-fired at the laboratory from the AK-47 and compare them to the cartridge casings that I collected at the crime scene. And he was able to say that the cartridge casings at the crime scene were in fact fired from the same weapon.
Technicians next examined the field jacket seized from Kanzi's apartment closet. If this was the same coat witnesses had seen the shooter wearing when he fired point blank into their vehicles, tiny shards of glass would be embedded in its material.
You had glass from a German car, glass from a Swedish car, glass from an American car, and if he had all 3 of those types of glass in his clothing or on his shoes, then that would be pretty obvious that he was, if not there, at least he was near the scene when it happened, because he's got all this glass on him. They were able to find glass particles in his clothing that matched the type of glass that came from all of the vehicles at the scene.
Investigators had enough evidence to charge Mir Amal Kanzi with capital murder and malicious wounding. The FBI also filed charges of flight to avoid prosecution and offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to Kanzi's capture. Agents fanned out to interview members of the Washington area Pakistani community. They were looking for Kanzi's friends, acquaintances, or anyone who had come into contact with him.
We learned that Mr. Kanzi had gone to a market in Herndon, Virginia, and the individual who ran the market had a connection at a travel agency. And we learned through this individual that Mr. Kanzi had come to him on the afternoon of the 25th, the day of the shooting, and bought a one-way ticket to Pakistan.
The manager said that Kanzi had only one suitcase and needed a ride to the airport, so the manager drove Kanzi there himself. Agents confirmed that Kanzi boarded a flight to Quetta, Pakistan, a city less than 80 miles from the Afghanistan border. 2 weeks after the shooting spree at the CIA headquarters, a worldwide manhunt for the killer got underway. The investigation would begin 8,000 miles away from the crime scene in the Muslim nation of Pakistan. In February 1993, 32-year-old Pakistani Mir Amal Kanzi was wanted by the FBI for killing 2 and wounding 3 CIA employees on the highway outside CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. 2 weeks after the shooting, agents learned that on January 25th, Kanzi had boarded a one-way flight to Quetta, Pakistan, a city less than 80 miles from the Afghanistan border. By now, he could be anywhere. Finding the fugitive halfway around the world presented overwhelming problems for FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett.
One of the difficulties in investigating any case overseas is that, first of all, you have no jurisdiction to begin with. You're just another citizen, a U.S. citizen traveling to a foreign country. So the key in catching any fugitive, obviously, is developing intelligence information. And you do that typically through informants.
The FBI turned to DEA Supervisory Special Agent Gregory Lee for help. Since Pakistan had been a major source country of heroin and hashish, the DEA already had established many reliable contacts and informants over the previous 10 years. At the time of the investigation, Agent Lee was the resident agent in charge of the DEA's office in Karachi, Pakistan.
Well, the working environment there is a complete contrast to what an FBI agent would be used to working domestically in the United States. And it's like you literally fell out of a tree and then showed up at a place that is foreign to him in every way, to include the language, the infrastructure, how to get around, who to see. We could provide him with protection, with weapons, with anything he needed to help conduct his investigation.
In a country of 135 million people that was politically volatile and had rampant corruption among officials, the FBI would need all the help it could get. Agent Garrett also realized that Kanzi would have many sympathetic supporters who could hide him in Pakistan or even in neighboring Afghanistan.
He would be respected in Afghanistan. In fact, he was respected in Pakistan. The CIA, in particular, and the U.S. government in general, is not well liked in either one of those countries. And as a result, people didn't want to give you information about him, because they thought what he did was, in some people's words, heroic.
In March of 1993, the U.S. State Department declared Kanzi's alleged attack on CIA employees an act of terrorism and raised the reward for information leading to his capture to $2 million. With the groundwork established, Agent Garrett boarded a 21-hour flight to Karachi, Pakistan. When he landed, DEA agents had already arranged for him to meet his first contact. Agents distributed pamphlets and matchbooks with Kanzi's photo, publicizing the $2 million reward in English, Arabic, and Punjabi. The reward generated leads from as far away as Thailand and London. But informants in Pakistan claimed Kanzi was hiding among the small border towns and tribes in Afghanistan.
Kanzi's family originally was from Afghanistan. Their family roots go back to Afghanistan. And keep in mind that the city that Kanzi is from, Quetta, Pakistan, is only about 80 miles from Afghanistan. And so the natural link between Kanzi, Quetta, family heritage, and Afghanistan made sense.
Agents traveled to Kanzi's large family home in Quetta and interviewed his brothers, who were wealthy landowners. They confirmed that he had visited them back in January, a few days after the shooting in Virginia. Kanzi arrived unannounced, carrying only one small bag. That was unusual, considering the length of the trip from the U.S. The brothers also thought it was odd that Kanzi was wearing no coat, since winter in Pakistan was then at its coldest. Kanzi only stayed for a few days, then left as quickly as he'd arrived. He didn't tell them where he was going, and they hadn't heard from him since.
Not very long, just enough to...
A few weeks later, the brothers became aware that their brother Amal was a wanted terrorist from reports on CNN.
Give you a card.
Agents believed it was likely that Kanzi had disappeared over the nearby border into Afghanistan.
We knew that it would be safer for him in Afghanistan because, by and large, Afghanistan, particularly back then, is a country that's just basically a bunch of tribes that control different parts of Afghanistan. At that particular time, really had no central government that had control of Afghanistan. So it's like, who would you even go to ask permission to come into Afghanistan?
The investigation had hit a dead end. Agents returned from Pakistan without the fugitive. Kanzi's trail went cold for the next 3 years, so the State Department raised the reward for information leading to his capture to $3.5 million. While Agent Garrett waited in Washington for the reward money to flush out a viable informant, he spent time with FBI fingerprint experts. Since so much time had passed, he needed to learn how to recognize Kanzi through his fingerprints in order to be certain they had the right man if he was arrested in a remote location. The agent studied the unique ridges and grooves of each one of Kanzi's 10 fingerprints that he'd given the INS years earlier.
I see that.
He was also taught how to fingerprint a resisting suspect under field conditions.
This is a case that obviously took a large chunk of my life to work on, you know, and I guess one of my fears might be that we never would catch him, you know, and you know, which is entirely possible.
In April 1997, after 4 years of pursuit, an FBI agent at the U.S. consulate in Karachi, Pakistan, received a call from one of their more reliable sources. The man claimed he had information on Kanzi's whereabouts, but the informant didn't want to say more over the phone.
All right.
He told the agent to wait in a public place and that a second man would contact him on his cell phone in an hour. The crowded streets of Karachi would provide ample cover. If the wrong people saw the informant talking to an American agent, he would certainly be killed. As instructed, the agent waited on the street for the call. The agent hoped his contact would have viable information that would finally lead the FBI to Kanzi. The informant claimed he not only knew where Kanzi was, but that he could put the fugitive in a specific hotel at a certain time to enable his arrest. The informant represented a group of Kanzi's protectors who decided the reward money was too great to pass up. The highest levels of the U.S. government were involved. The White House approved a secret arrest plan. The Secretary of State then secured permission from the Pakistani leader for U.S. agents to carry out the operation.
Pakistan is very sensitive to their image. They're very proud people. They don't like the idea of a Pakistani being identified as an international terrorist, somebody who would travel halfway around the world to Washington for the purpose of killing CIA employees. To them, he's an embarrassment.
Gentlemen, welcome.
Agents arrived in Pakistan with a special ops team from the FBI training facility in Quantico, Virginia.
Just exactly what our intelligence.
They would need to extract Kanzi from a hotel room in a remote desert town in north-central Pakistan, where their informant promised he'd be.
Getting his fingerprint is going to be key. Gentlemen, let me direct
Each member would be assigned a task based on a surveillance report of the hotel's layout.
Kanzi is.
Agents secured a room across from the hotel where the informant claimed Kanzi would be staying. They had no way to independently confirm if Kanzi was there. All they had was the informant's word. The informant told investigators that Kanzi's room was on an upper floor.
All right, let's do that. That's great. Okay.
Based on the informant's description of the interior layout, agents would have to first secure the lobby and then the stairwell before they could enter Kanzi's room. The informant added that the hotel did not lock its front door and had no security guard.
Show us where the person.
We took that information, we developed an arrest plan, how we were going to enter the room, who was going to do hall security, what we were going to do once we were in the room. Because it's extremely important when you do arrest scenarios that everyone know exactly where they're going and what they're supposed to do.
Each had their assignments. Once they secured the lobby and stairwell, the front agent would coax the fugitive out of his room by calling for morning prayer. They put on body armor and checked their weapons. To hide their paraphernalia, they wore shalwar kamises, traditional Pakistani clothing, over their Western garb. On June 15, 1997, the operation to arrest Mir Emal Kanzi went into action. The team arrived at 4 a.m., figuring there'd be fewer people on the street at that early hour. But when they tried to enter the hotel, they found the front door was locked.
We can't get in. So here's 4 Americans dressed up in Pakistani garb standing out, at 4:05 in the morning outside this hotel. Clearly the anxiety was, off the charts because of where you were. It's almost like you're in a dream a little bit. It's like this is surreal.
To make matters worse, the street was filled with people who likely noticed that the Americans were clearly out of place.
We didn't realize that this particular location was extremely hot in the summer. So people started to work at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So the street was full of people. So it's another thing that we didn't calculate for.
The informant had been wrong about the locked door. After 4.5 years of pursuing Kanzi, the FBI had hit another obstacle. On June 15, 1997, an FBI arrest team disguised in Pakistani garb attempted to gain entry to a locked hotel in north-central Pakistan where they believed suspected terrorist Mir Emal Kanzi was hiding. But to FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett, it appeared that their informant had misled the team.
When we went up to the hotel, and the initial intelligence was that the door would be unlocked and there'd be no security guard, and we get there and the door is locked, and then within a few minutes we realized that there is a security guard there.
Agents summoned the guard and pushed their way into the hotel. The team secured the lobby and moved quickly up the stairs. They hoped the informant had been correct about Kanzi's room number, if the fugitive was in fact there at all. When everyone was in place, the front agent knocked on the door and called for morning prayer to coax out whoever was on the other side of the door. If Kanzi was inside, he may be armed. Agents prepared for the worst. The door cracked open, and the agents pushed forward. The man put up a struggle and began to scream. He had to be gagged so others in the hotel would not be awakened.
I tell him, after he calms down a little bit, that if I take the gag off, will you promise not to yell anymore? And he said yes. So we take the gag off. He doesn't yell anymore. I ask him his name. He says an obscenity to me in English. He didn't look like his picture. He gained weight. And I said, you know, I'm not sure if this is the right guy.
The agent hoped the man's fingerprint would match prints Kanzi had provided for the INS 6 years earlier.
Okay, guys.
He inked the suspect's thumb and compared it to Kanzi's known thumbprint.
What are you?
The prints matched. After more than 4 years and 8,000 miles, the FBI finally had suspected terrorist Mir Amal Kanzi in custody. But their mission was by no means complete. Not only did they have to get Kanzi and themselves out of the hotel safely, but also out of Pakistan altogether. DEA Supervisory Special Agent Gregory Lee assisted the FBI with logistical support in Pakistan.
You've got a guy in custody now, and you're in a foreign land, you're about 8,000 miles from home, you're out in what's essentially the high desert that would be Death Valley here, and you're trying to get this guy from Pakistan back to the United States.
Americans holding a Pakistani citizen captive in his own country is dangerous. Agents drove the international fugitive to a waiting helicopter and flew him to Islamabad, where permission for extradition was granted the next day. FBI headquarters in Washington was informed with a code phrase: "The package has been delivered." The arrest team flew Kanzi out of Pakistan on an Air Force plane. To avoid landing in a foreign country, the plane was refueled in mid-air, so Kanzi could not ask for asylum before facing justice in the United States. During the 21-hour non-stop flight, Kanzi confided that he'd been in Afghanistan for almost the entire 4 years while he was on the run. He also claimed responsibility for the shooting in front of CIA headquarters. As a political statement against the CIA and the United States, he decided to kill workers before they pulled into the heavily guarded entrance. He explained that he didn't shoot any women because Islam forbids it. He said that after the shooting, he was surprised that he was still alive. So he drove to a nearby park, went to lunch, then bought a plane ticket to Pakistan.
I said, well, why did you quit shooting? Because you had told us earlier that you had all this ammunition on you and that we had found all this ammunition in your apartment. And he said that he ran out of people to shoot.
Affirming that his statement had been given freely and willingly, Kanzi signed his confession. After arriving in the U.S., a chopper transported the prisoner to a secure location. Under heavy security, agents delivered Kanzi to the Fairfax County Police to face the murder and assault charges. Fairfax County Detective Jeff Miller remembers that day.
Having him captured and brought back to the United States showed to the whole rest of the world that the United States, the FBI, the Central Intelligence Agency, is not going to just let this sort of thing lie and not do something about it. No matter how long it takes, no matter where these kinds of people may hide, the United States is going to do their very best to try and track these people down and bring them back to justice.
Kanzi was found guilty of murder, malicious shooting, and using a firearm in the commission of a felony. He was sentenced to death and is scheduled for execution in 2002. In the wake of the shootings, memorials to the slain victims were established on Highway 123, where they fell to the gunman's bullets. The CIA tightened its security at the Langley compound and at all of its offices around the world. The successful investigation would prove to be another in the long line of battles against terrorism.